all about two significant court orders that have just come down.
Yeah, we're talking thousands, potentially.
Thousands. Okay, so before we get into the details, let's set the stage.
Yeah.
One from a federal court in California and the other one from Maryland. Essentially, these judges have ordered the Trump administration to rehire thousands of federal employees who were recently fired. These employees were all on probationary status.
Yeah, that's a key point here, probationary status.
Exactly. So let's unpack this, starting with the California ruling. This decision came from U.S. District Judge William Alsop. His initial order covered employees at a bunch of agencies. You've got USDA, Defense Department, Energy, Interior, Treasury, and the VA. So what happened next?
Well, the union representing those workers, they didn't waste any time. They went right back in Judge Alsop and asked him to broaden the scope of his order to encompass even more agencies.
Really?
They were aiming to include the Commerce Department, the Education Department, Health and Human Services, Homeland Security, Housing and Urban Development, the Justice Department, Transportation, EPA, NASA, the National Science Foundation, and the Small Business Administration.
So basically they wanted almost everyone in there.
It was a pretty ambitious ask, for sure.
And Judge Alsop, well, he didn't mince words in his assessment of what went down, did he?
Not at all. He called these mass firings a sham strategy, straight up. And he went further to say that the Office of Personnel Management, OPM, acted unlawfully when they directed these dismissals.
Strong words. So does this mean agencies can't reduce their workforce anymore?
No, not quite. Judge Alsop clarified that federal agencies can still carry out what are called reductions in force.
Right, the RIFs.
Exactly. But he stressed that they have to go about it the right way, by the book, following the proper legal procedures.
Got it. So let's switch gears and head over to Maryland, where there was another major development. This time we're talking about U.S. District Court Judge James K. Bridar. Just like in California, Judge Bridar ordered the federal government to rehire thousands of probationary employees they had let go. So two separate cases, but both ended up with the same outcome.
Yeah, very similar outcomes indeed.
And the Maryland ruling was actually even broader in terms of how many agencies it impacted, right?
Much broader. We're talking a total of 18 federal agencies. Agriculture, Commerce, Defense, Education, Energy, HHS, Homeland Security, HUD, Interior, Labor, Transportation, Treasury, the VA, USAID, the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, the EPA, the FDIC, the General Services Administration, OPM itself, the Small Business Administration, and the National Archives.
So why did Judge Bridar rule the way he did? What was his legal rationale?
Well, he said, and I quote, "The law is clear that when dismissing an employee due to unsatisfactory performance, the employer must honestly be dissatisfied with the probationer's conduct or performance after giving him a fair trial on the job." So basically, you can't just fire someone on probation without a real reason and a fair chance to prove themselves.
It makes sense. And who brought this case to court in Maryland?
This wasn't just one person or group. It was a big deal, a multi-state lawsuit filed by 20 Democratic attorneys general. Their main point was that these firings were miscategorized. They argued that instead of being about poor performance, they were actually part of a larger strategy to reduce the federal workforce without going through the proper RIF process.
So they were claiming that the administration was trying to bypass the rules for RIFs.
Exactly. And RIFs come with certain legal requirements, like offering job protections for veterans, giving employees a chance to find similar jobs within the government, and giving the affected states a 60-day notice so they can handle the potential increase in unemployment.
Important safeguards for sure.
The attorneys general were adamant that none of those steps were followed.
Judge Bridar seems to have agreed with them. Did he have anything else to say about this?
Yeah, he actually made a pretty interesting comment. He referenced Elon Musk's famous saying, "Move fast and break things," which is kind of the Silicon Valley motto, right?
Right. Disrupt and innovate.
Exactly. But then Judge Bridar added, if that involves breaking the law, then that becomes problematic. Clearly, he wasn't buying the idea that speed justifies ignoring legal procedures. Well, the administration has already said they're going to appeal Judge Alsop's ruling, so this fight's not over yet.
So even if they get their jobs back, they might still face another round of cuts down the line.
It's definitely possible, and that's a lot to deal with for anyone.
For sure. So to sum this all up, what are the key takeaways from these rulings?
Well, 2 different federal judges have now said the same thing. The Trump administration has to rehire thousands of these fired probationary employees. They both cited serious concerns about how those firings were handled and whether the proper procedures were followed.
This seems like a pretty big setback for the administration's plans to downsize the federal workforce.
It definitely complicates things, and it raises important questions about how much power the executive branch has to reshape the bureaucracy.
It also makes you wonder what this means for the future of federal employees. If they can be fired so easily, even when they're doing their jobs well, how can they be confident about their careers?
And how does that impact the quality of the services they provide to the public?
These are all big questions. We have to see how this unfolds.
Absolutely. It's going to be interesting to see how this develops.
We'll certainly be keeping an eye on it. That's all the time we have for our deep dive today. Thanks for listening.
My pleasure.
And remember, stay engaged.